I was just reading something about CNN's ratings and MSNBC's ratings post-election. They've crashed. All these left-wing kooks on YouTube are hemorrhaging subscribers, where people go, you guys are out of touch, you're not accurate, you're delusional, and people are speaking with their subscriptions, and they're speaking with their purchasing of the Washington Post, and they're purchasing the New York Times. The New York Times just debunked, in the most insane way, debunked RFK Jr.'s assertion that the ingredients in Fruit Loops are different in Canada than they are in the United States. They fact-checked it while saying he was accurate. So their fact check, it's so dumb when you see the I tweeted it. The fact check is so dumb because the fact check says it's not correct. They have the same ingredients except for these harmful chemicals.
Meanwhile,
Trump administration officials have been sending babies and other young children hold on, to at least three. Can we put up the graphic of this? Thank you. Do we have it? No. 3 tender age shelters in South Texas. Lawyers and medical providers just. I think I'm going to have to hand this off. Yeah. Sorry. That does it for us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow.
I mean, if you look at some of these exit polls, I mean, I live in Virginia. Immigration was the #1 issue. I mean, again, these could change in Virginia.
Well, Virginia does have a border with West Virginia.
Elon Musk bought X and turned it into the social media arm of the MAGA movement. And we all sat there right in the middle of it during the campaign, possibly not realizing that we're sitting there like fat chickens, just getting attacked all day and just being part of this MAGA messaging. However, the election's over. Everybody's getting smarter and better. I'm not sure that the right idea is to leave Twitter and just go to Blue Sky, a friendlier place, because then we remain in our echo chambers.
Elon Musk publicly was pressuring Donald Trump to pick Lutnick as Treasury Secretary, along with the esteemed Cat Turd. And as goes Cat Turd on X, so goes Middle America. Now, Cat Turd was actually way
I'm a little concerned that you know that, but okay.
Yes.
With that being said, the real problem here, right, is the fact that the media is currently boohoo, whining, crying about so-called social media influencers, political influencers online having more credibility than they do, right? They're upset, they're mad because audiences, particularly young people, are getting their news from people online, right? They're turning away from CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC. They're turning away from those outlets and they're going online for news. And this is what they really, really, really don't like.
1 in 5 adults regularly get their news from influencers on social media. The number is even higher among younger Americans, with almost 40% under the age of 30 getting their news from those sources. According to the Pew Research Center, the social media site X remains the most widely accessed platform, followed by Instagram and YouTube.
I mean, that comes obviously for political news. And Mike, that's the challenge. You grew up in a newsroom like Gene grew up in a newsroom. I mean, that's a lot of challenge. That's a challenge for a lot of mainstream media sources is, do they make themselves relevant again to here 20% of adults who actually get influencers on social media?
I don't know
maybe somebody who makes baskets, and while they're making baskets, they look up and say, vote for candidate X.
I don't know how they make themselves, how we make ourselves relevant again, because we can't compete with 20-second snippets on an iPhone, walking up the street, getting your entire news digest of the day in less than a minute on your phone as you're walking under the crowd with coffee in one hand and your phone in the other. I don't know how we catch up to that.
Yeah, so this is just another example of how the media is so disconnected from reality, right? They think that people are really getting their news from social media influencers who are basically covering a topic for 1 minute at a time. And that's actually not what's happening, right? People are going to so-called social media influencers and political influencers, not for short form content to get their news. No, they're actually paying attention to long form content, okay? Podcasts, right? Joe Rogan's podcast is like 2 or 3 hours long at a time. And people are actually consuming their news in ways in which they can get real conversations, real analysis, and not just this type of misleading propaganda and Trump derangement that is prevalent on mainstream liberal media outlets like MSNBC, right? Like, for example, there's a lot of outrage over this headline here from MSNBC in which they claim Laken Riley's killer never stood a chance. Laken Riley's killer never stood a chance. What do you think that the layman, somebody who knows nothing about this case, would believe about this case from reading this headline, right? What do you guys think they would believe about the murderer here, right? They would believe that, oh, wait, this was a miscarriage of justice, that this guy never stood a chance in the sense that somehow his trial was unfair, right? This is what they will believe. And again, this is why they're getting a whole lot of backlash over this, right? A whole bunch of people are upset, calling it absolutely sickening, okay? This person says, you know who never stood a chance? Laken Riley, the actual victim, who they don't give a damn about, by the way. And this is also the reason why the media lacks credibility, is because of all the constant gaslighting when it comes to the issues, right? Like illegal immigration, right? They swear up and down that this guy murdering Laken Riley had nothing to do with Joe Biden, right? It had nothing to do with the sanctuary city policies, the open border policies, the soft on crime policy. It didn't have anything to do with that. The illegal immigrant problem is not connected to crime. That's made up, right? All this stuff is made up. It doesn't exist, okay? And even if it does exist, even if it is true, it's not Biden's fault. It's not the Democrats' fault. No. It is Trump's fault. And that is what ABC News basically try to argue in their coverage of this. Take a look.
This death of Laken Riley and the subsequent trial has essentially been a massive political lightning rod here in this country. And you said it there yourself, the president-elect campaigning on the death of Laken Riley and pointing to the current administration, saying that their laws and what they're calling failed policies contributed to Laken Riley's death. I want to remind you that Ibarra entered this country illegally in 2022, according to law enforcement officials, and he was paroled and released for further processing by ICE. And since that time he entered the country, he was arrested another time. Law enforcement officers saying that he was arrested in 2023 in New York City and charged with acting in a manner to injure a child less than 17, as well as a motor vehicle violation. But it's important to note that although there is very little evidence indicating a connection between immigration and violent crime, this is still something the President-elect Trump, several Republicans on the Hill wanted to essentially plant their flag on and point that to the current Biden administration. All of this vitriol that we're hearing from Republicans and President-elect Trump regarding the policies of the Biden administration, it's important to know that President-elect Trump did force Republicans to essentially tank a bipartisan border security bill that both sides of the aisle said would have essentially addressed border security and immigration issues, Kira.
Yeah, and this is why the mainstream liberal media doesn't have any credibility. This is why these so-called journalists do not have credibility, right? Base Mike Lee says Laken Riley's killer is now the victim, according to MSNBC. Trump Jr. says, you literally can't make up this level of depravity. These people are sick. The guy is a murderer. He's an illegal alien that killed an innocent young woman, but MSNBC would rather go to bat for him. However much you hate MSNBC, it's not enough. Stephen L. Miller says, and this is why MSNBC, the brand, is being sold off for pennies. Facts. Defiant L says, hey, MSNBC, do you know who also never stood a chance? Laken Riley. Laken Riley should be alive today, but she never stood a chance because of this monster. Adam Johnson says, look at how MSNBC framed the conviction and sentencing of Laken Riley's killer. Jose Ibarra never stood a chance. No, Laken Riley never stood a chance against this monster. Absolutely sickening. Yeah, so again, people are backlashing against this. And this is why X is such an important platform, because it matters, right? This stuff being called out matters, and it has an effect. And the outrage was so much that MSNBC decided, you know what, we got to change the headline, okay? MSNBC alters sickening Laken Riley killer headline after outrage online. Yeah, so they changed the new headline to Laken Riley's killer. The guilt of Laken Riley's killer was never in doubt, right? So that's what they did. They altered the headline because the original headline was misleading. Okay, it really was.
There are some really good news kind of influencer types, and I think it's great that they're getting information about global and current events in front of younger people who maybe don't tune into traditional media. But to Sarah's point, there has to be some fact checking and actually verification of the things that are shared, because I spend a lot of time on Instagram Reels, and I'm served up things that I get outraged about, and then I realize, oh, that's not even true, but I have the sense to go and look it up. But what I do worry about with this, like the blue sky versus X, because a lot of people I follow on X, Twitter, have now left to go to blue sky. I worry we're all going into our own echo chamber. So we had this, this election that was tense. Donald Trump won, and the right is going to stay on X, and then the left is all going to be on blue sky. How do we try to talk to each other?
Unfortunately, I will have to say, the other side, I think, has driven people away, because it's not just discourse. It's nasty name calling and coming after your family, and I'm going to do this to you. And I don't think anyone should have to take that from anybody if they don't have to. So I think a lot of Republicans who also are getting that because they have opinions that may differ from what is being said, they're moving as well. Because, and I know why also, because, as I believe, Elon Musk is the actual vice president.